I felt tears welling up as I compiled this documentary on the African slave trade. How could a human being be so cruel to his own fellow human? The more I researched, the more I uncovered stories darker and more horrifying than most people will ever know. Our forefathers endured unimaginable suffering, and the least we can do today is pray for their souls to find rest. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, so together we can keep these stories alive. The history of slavery is not just history, it is a painful reminder of humanity's capacity for cruelty and oppression. Who needs horror movies when the true nightmare lies in the story of Africa's slave trade? Now, let's dive in. Men, women, and children, captured from their villages, bound in chains, were forced onto ships designed not for people but for profit. They were packed below deck in spaces so cramped that one could barely move, let alone stretch or breathe. Shackled wrist to wrist, ankle to ankle, row after row of bodies lay pressed against each other in suffocating darkness. The stench of blood, sweat, vomit, and human waste turned the ship's belly into a pit of unbearable rot. Disease spread like wildfire, and death became as common as breath. For every voyage, hundreds were loaded, but not all would arrive. It is estimated that at least 2 million Africans died on these ships, their bodies thrown overboard into the vast Atlantic. The ocean itself became a graveyard, its waves carrying the whispers of lost souls. Some captains calculated the bodies lost to sickness as part of their business expenses. To them, these lives were nothing more than numbers on a ledger. But not all deaths came from illness. Many enslaved Africans, driven to desperation, chose to leap into the sea rather than endure one more moment of torment. They believed that by sinking beneath the waters, their spirits might return home to Africa. Others staged uprisings, attacking the crew with whatever strength remained in their frail, chained bodies. Some revolts succeeded briefly, but most were crushed with brutal retaliation. Above deck, the cruelty continued. Women were dragged out, assaulted by sailors, stripped not only of freedom but of dignity. Children wailed, their cries drowned by the crashing waves and the groans of their parents. Hunger gnawed at the bellies of the enslaved, yet food was rationed with cruelty. Too little for survival, too much for hope. The journey could last weeks, sometimes months, with no escape from the living nightmare. Survivors of the Middle Passage emerged hollowed, traumatized, and scarred for life. For them, survival was not victory. It was a sentence to the next stage of bondage, to the plantations and fields of unending toil. The Middle Passage was not a journey across water. It was a descent into hell, a corridor of death where millions entered, but never returned. And yet, even in the face of such horror, the enslaved carried something indestructible: the memory of their homeland, the songs of their ancestors, the fire of resilience. Though chains bound their bodies, they could not extinguish the hope of freedom that still flickered in their hearts. The slave trade was not simply a crime of history, it was a crime against humanity itself. Its wounds remain open, its echoes still heard in the cries for justice and equality today. This is not a story of the past, it is a story that must be remembered. For to forget is to betray the millions who suffered, the millions who perished, and the millions who resisted in whatever way they could. Smash the like button and click the subscribe button if you're interested in Africa documentary. I will continue to create videos to bring our history to light. Now let's move ahead. The story of slavery cannot begin on the ships or the shores. It must begin on the very soil where countless lives were spent, wasted, and broken. The plantation. The plantation was not merely farmland. It was a vast theater of cruelty, where every breath, every heartbeat, was owned by another human being. Imagine waking at the crack of dawn, not to the warmth of family or the hope of new opportunities, but to the crack of a whip slicing through the morning air. Men, women, and even children were forced into endless rows of sugar, cotton, or tobacco fields, laboring under a sun that felt more like a punishment than a blessing. Their hands bled, their backs bent, their voices silenced. Slavery on the plantations was not just about work, it was about domination. Masters ruled with violence, and overseers enforced terror as daily policy. The lash was more common than food, and obedience was demanded not with respect but with fear. For the enslaved, the smallest sign of resistance, pausing to catch a breath, looking a master in the eye, or even whispering a prayer of hope, could lead to merciless torture. The whip tore into flesh until skin became rivers of blood. Iron collars choked necks, chains clamped on ankles, and some were branded with hot irons like cattle. Women endured horrors that history struggles to fully speak of. They carried not only the weight of labor, but the unspeakable burden of sexual violence. They were assaulted by those who claimed to own them, and when children were born of such brutality, they too were forced into chains, becoming property at birth. On the plantations, life expectancy was cruelly short. For many, the only escape was death, whether by disease, exhaustion, or desperate attempts at suicide. And yet, even amid the cruelty, whispers of resistance lingered. Songs sung in hidden corners, prayers whispered into the night, and the courage to dream of freedom kept the human spirit alive in chains. But before the plantation, there was another horror, the stage where this suffering was orchestrated. The auction block. The auction block was the marketplace of human misery. Enslaved Africans, torn from their homeland, stood on wooden platforms while buyers inspected them like livestock. Their teeth were examined, their bodies prodded, their muscles measured. A mother clutching her child was pried apart by calloused hands. A husband's desperate pleas to stay with his wife fell on deaf ears as the auctioneer's gavel came crashing down. Families were dismantled in an instant, their cries echoing into the air while the crowd placed bids. This was not just commerce, it was psychological warfare. Every scream of a separated child, every tear of a broken parent, was meant to remind the enslaved that they were nothing more than property. Human beings reduced to prices written on slips of paper. The auction blocks scattered across the Americas and Europe were the factories of despair, where identities were erased, languages silenced, and names replaced. An African who once had a village, a history, and a family now had a new label, a new master, and a life reduced to servitude. This was the path of slavery, capture, separation, and torment. And yet, even these horrors were only a continuation of an even darker beginning, one that began not on land, but on water. This is how cruel and how our forefathers suffered. It breaks me anytime I think of slave trade. This were lives human being like me and you being wasted like a mosquito, but it is what it is. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and like the button. It is free. Just do it please to support me.